Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Wednesday, November 9th. And we begin tonight with news on Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy, which is set to be unveiled by Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly within the next month. Ms. Joly will unveil the strategy that is poised to see Canada moving closer to countries such as India while taking a cautious approach with China. In a speech today, she says China is increasingly diverging from Canadian values, so businesses operating in that country face risks of political interference and the violation of trade rules. Ms. Joly will join Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at summits in Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand. Meanwhile, Canada's chief veterans advocate is reminding Canadians of the government's roles in helping injured veterans. She says there are still 23,000 veterans who are waiting for the federal government to process their disability claims. Now, that backlog, paired with long wait times, has proven to be a source of frustration and anxiety for many of Canada's ill and injured soldiers. The government has repeatedly promised to fix the situation and says it has begun hiring more staff. But ombudsperson Nishika Jardine says veterans are waiting too long. Turning to Western Canada now, where the family of a Saskatchewan farmer says he has been killed while fighting in Ukraine. 33-year-old Joseph Hildebrand of Herbert also served 2 tours of duty with the Canadian military in Afghanistan. The family was notified by other people in his unit. A cousin says Mr. Hildebrand was apparently with 12 other soldiers on a mission around the city of Bakhmut, and that only 3 of them made it back alive. Global Affairs Canada says it is aware of the death of a Canadian in Ukraine. Provincial and territorial ministers responsible for the status of women have endorsed the National Action Plan to end gender-based violence. Federal Minister Marcy Ian says the move sets the stage for negotiations to begin soon. Now, this will be on bilateral agreements for programs in each jurisdiction aimed at preventing gender-based violence. Ms. Ian says bilateral deals are necessary because every province and territory has unique needs. This year's federal budget committed $539.3 million over 5 years to help the provinces and territories implement that National Action Plan. All right, moving to a major shortage of children's painkillers. Federal health officials are concerned about shortages that have left pharmacy and other store shelves bare. They say supplies are increasing rapidly, but not quickly enough to meet an expected winter surge in demand. Health Canada issued an advisory earlier last month. It was warning that children's ibuprofen and acetaminophen were in short supply due to unprecedented demand. The shortages were discussed during health meetings in Vancouver this week. In the prairies, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is heading back to the legislature after winning a seat in a by-election. She defeated 4 challengers to win the constituency of Brooks Medicine Hat. Ms. Smith has been absent from the legislature for 7 years, which makes this the first time that she'll sit as an MLA since her time as leader of the Wild Rose Party. Turning our attention to the north, where a national policing program aimed at serving Indigenous communities is expanding to Nunavut. Through the First Nations and Inuit policing program, new RCMP officers are to be hired across the territory over the next 3 years. The federal and territorial governments say that the agreements means residents will have a greater say in how policing is conducted in their communities. Environment Canada meteorologists are calling for a fall storm over the Maritimes. This comes as a tropical storm builds up on its way to Florida after making landfall in the Bahamas. The storm is expected to gain hurricane strength, making landfall in Florida as a Category 1 hurricane later today or early tomorrow. Meteorologist Bob Robichaud says because Storm Nicole is being followed by a winter storm system, Newfoundland and Labrador may see freezing rain or snow Saturday night into Sunday morning. The Toronto International Film Festival is renaming its largest cinema after Black civil rights activist Viola Desmond. TIFF CEO Cameron Bailey made the announcement at a special event celebrating the legacy of Miss Desmond and her sister, activist Wanda Robson, who died earlier this year. Now, Ms. Bailey says that TIFF is pledging to raise $2 million over the next 5 years. This will be to provide support to Black women creators, develop programming for Black audiences, and amplify Ms. Desmond's and Ms. Robson's stories. Forum Daily will be right back after the break with a look at one doctor's perspective of a health system in crisis. An interview with Dr. Abhishek Raut from Apple Tree Medical Group coming up next, so stay with us. We'll be right back. A hopeful two-day meeting between provincial health ministers and their federal counterpart came to a disappointing end yesterday. The federal government has withdrawn from a joint communique on health funding with provincial and territorial ministers. Now, this ended 2 days of widely anticipated meetings in Vancouver without any agreement. Federal Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos blames the premiers for releasing a statement that he says depicted the talks as a failure. Now, he says this forced their ministers, quote, to think of one thing and one thing only: money. BC Health Minister Adrian Dix made it clear that he and other provincial and territorial health ministers were united behind a request for federal funding to be increased from 22 to 35%. Now, meanwhile, healthcare systems across the country are dealing with issues including staff shortages, overwhelmed hospitals, mental health issues, and new virus variants. Well, joining us now to give us his perspective amid all of this is Dr. Abhishek Raut, Medical Director at Apple Tree Medical Group. Dr. Raut, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Pleasure to be here.
So, what is your take on the health minister's meetings with Federal Health Minister Duclos?
Well, I think we had a golden opportunity for the federal and provincial health ministers to really look and advocate for Canadian healthcare and even help the 1.3 million healthcare workers from coast to coast. I think we were hoping this meeting could really chart a clear path to a tangible action plan and help rebuild some of these struggling healthcare systems that we've been having. Unfortunately, it didn't get to where we wanted. There are some positives for it, though. I think the health ministers definitely understood the issues, and sometimes in politics, that is the biggest problem. So at least everyone is on the same page in terms of priorities and concerns we're facing. Remember, this is also the first meeting they've had since 2018 in person. So is there a lot more work to be done? Absolutely. Is it going to be solved in 2 days at a conference room in the Pan Pacific Hotel? Probably not.
Now, on a personal note, how are you, your colleagues, your employees faring in what some health ministers are currently calling a crumbling healthcare system, Dr. Raut?
Well, to me, I would have to agree with my colleagues at the Canadian Medical Association and the Canadian Nursing Association that it's very clear that Canada's health system is not really working the way it should. We're seeing doctor and nursing shortages, and the healthcare crisis is having very detrimental consequences to our system. And people are losing confidence when they are concerned that they may not be able to access those critical health services. I think now what we have to do is really focus on that communication and coordinated piece to really overcome those challenges that we have.
Now, as we mentioned, there is no shortage of issues hitting the Canadian healthcare system, Dr. Raut. So, what has been your primary concern amid all of this? What's been hitting you the hardest right now?
My primary concern here is really about our patients. I think it's very clear to everyone, even at the conference, that Canadian patients and caregivers are really continuing to suffer. So we're having healthcare providers who are burning out and leaving their professions. We're seeing wait lists that are growing rapidly. Emergency departments are closing due to staff shortages. So I think we're all deeply concerned about what that means for Canadian healthcare, but also for the average Canadian who's a patient and a caregiver as well.
Deeply concerned indeed, Dr. Raut. Now, we mentioned health ministers are asking for an increase to the Canada Health Transfer benefit. So, can you tell us a little bit more how that would benefit your own practice, your staff, and your patients?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I have a bit of background in health systems, so when I look at this situation, I think the health transfers would be a good start, but I don't think it would necessarily fix all of these problems, even if the transfers went to 100%. I mean, these are structural issues that we've got to focus on: health system strengthening and accountability. Accountability meaning federal, provincial, territorial accountability, physician accountability, and patient accountability. So I think there's a big conversation here that we have to look at what the future of healthcare is going to be in Canada.
Right, Dr. Rao, just about a minute left here, but what's at risk here if the federal government does not take action on these supports?
Yeah, I think what we're going to see is if we don't really work together on this, everyone is going to suffer, especially the most vulnerable, our patients and caregivers. We're talking about serious system health challenges here that healthcare providers and organizations are continuing to have. We're going to need both short term and long term solutions here to really make a difference. And I think the Canadian Medical Association, the Canadian Nursing Association, and Healthcare Can have come up with a great policy piece called A Prescription for Hope, which is definitely worth checking out, which would look at some of those solutions there as well.
Prescription for Hope. Definitely have to take a look at that. Dr. Rao, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, stay with us. We'll be right back after the break. And when we return, we're going to be taking a look at a big move in the crypto world with the Binance FTX merger. Now, this move is just the latest example of just how quickly fortunes can change in the rapidly evolving space. We'll be speaking with Bobby Del Rio, host of the Daily Drop, which focuses on cryptocurrencies. So, a very interesting interview coming up next. Stay with us. Cryptocurrency prices plunged for a second straight day on Wednesday after crypto exchange Binance announced that it was pulling out of its deal to purchase its failing rival FTX Trading. The CEOs of the two exchanges, Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX and Changpeng Zhao of Binance, had publicly agreed to a merger Tuesday, pending the ability for Binance to perform due diligence of FTX's balance sheet. Now, that review apparently led to significant concerns for Binance and convinced it to back out of the deal, according to Binance in a statement. Cryptocurrency values have been dropping since. Well, joining us now to discuss the merger and what it means to the crypto space is Bobby Del Rio, host of the Daily Drop, which focuses on cryptocurrencies. Bobby, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me, Nima.
So tell us a little bit more about what's happening here. So Binance wanted to buy FTX, and now we hear it's walking away from this potential merger. Tell us what's going on here, Bobby.
Yes, well, unfortunately, within the last hour, it appears that Binance is walking away from this deal, which was going to be essentially the largest acquisition in the history of crypto for exchanges, certainly in a very long time. Unfortunately, now it appears to be one of the darkest days in crypto, as right now it looks like FTX may be declaring bankruptcy. This is one of the top exchanges in the entire world. So, this is like a Lehman Brothers moment for cryptocurrency. So it's pretty shocking, and a lot of people are going to feel the bloodbath that is ensuing right now. Unfortunately.
Shocking indeed. So, what kind of reasons did Binance give for walking away from this merger?
Well, to be honest, it wasn't unexpected that Binance would walk away, just because of the scrutiny and it's attracting the attention of the regulators. And this all really happened in the last day. It's been the last week that there have been questions, but really in the last day, unfortunately, it looks like FTX is somewhat of a house of cards. So the amount of debt that they essentially have two sister companies, right? So there's FTX and there's Alameda, and apparently it's almost like using one credit card to pay off the balance of the other, and then eventually the bank realizes that you don't have any money, and they kind of just ask for everything. That's essentially what happened. So all the customers started to realize, oh, like how much money does FTX have? And then they made the sort of classic bank run, and FTX essentially didn't have the money to pay everyone, and now it looks like they're declaring bankruptcy.
So, what do you expect to be the fate of FTX and their clients?
I don't see how they avoid bankruptcy, to be honest. I mean, if you think about the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, there was the bank bailouts. Um, the government was sort of invested in making sure the banks didn't fail because it would essentially collapse the entire economy. In this case, the good news, if you want to call it that, is the cryptocurrency market cap is really only about half of 1% of the global financial assets market cap. So the reality is FTX failing doesn't really affect most people in the economy. It's really bad for crypto, obviously, for anyone who holds FTT, which is like the coin for FTX, or you have money in FTX. You're probably going to lose all your money, if not most of it, unfortunately. But it shouldn't affect the broader economy. But it also means that the government doesn't really have an incentive to bail FTX out. I don't see anyone who has an incentive to bail them out. So I think we're just going to watch them fail. I think that's what's going to happen.
We really saw the value of digital currencies take a hit amid this merger. How do you see the values being impacted in the next couple of days?
Look, short term, everything is down a lot. I mean, Solana is down, I think, 50% in like a day or two, and this is like a one of the top cryptocurrencies in the world, right? This is supposed to be the Ethereum killer. Ethereum's number one competitor, and Ethereum too is taking a big hit. Every single cryptocurrency is taking a big hit. Now, it's short term. Usually, it's not this pronounced. Crypto is notoriously volatile. Although, to be honest, in the last few months, crypto has been um, fairly steady. Like Bitcoin's been trading in the sort of 18 to $21,000 range pretty steadily for a few months, and now I think they just dropped below 16,000 for the first time in years. Right, so it's really unexpected right now. Long term, I do think cryptocurrency is going to be fine, but the ecosystem is going to change a lot, and we're about to find out who's still going to have coins, right? Who's still going to have exchanges, and also I do believe it's signaling the beginning of a very rigid era of regulation. And make no mistake, governments and regulators are paying close attention.
Sounds like lots to keep our eyes on. Bobby, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me, Nima.
We'll be right back. U.S. midterm elections are proving to be tough as razor thin margins around the country have left control of Congress still undetermined. The Democrats showed some surprising strength as they defeated Republicans in a series of competitive races. They defied expectations that high inflation and low approval ratings would drag President Joe Biden's party down. In the House, Democrats kept seats in districts from Virginia to Kansas to Rhode Island. This while many districts in states like New York and California have not been called yet. Well, some big moves by Russia's military, which has announced that it is withdrawing from Ukraine's southern city of Kherson and nearby areas. Now, that would be another humiliating setback for Moscow's forces in the 8-month-old war. Ukrainian authorities did not immediately confirm the move. President Volodymyr Zelensky has suggested in recent days that the Russians were feigning a pullout from Kherson, this in order to lure the Ukrainian army into an entrenched battle. The top Russian military commander in Ukraine reported to Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu on Wednesday, and he said that it was impossible to deliver supplies to the city of Kherson and other areas. Mr. Shoigu agreed with his proposal to retreat and set up defenses on the eastern bank. Against the backdrop of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, NATO allies Poland and Slovakia are boosting defense spending. Poland will significantly raise defense spending to at least 3% of its annual economic output next year, and Slovakia is also investing heavily in its armed forces, according to their prime ministers. American basketball star Brittany Griner is being sent to a penal colony in Russia to serve the rest of her sentence for drug possession. Ms. Griner's appeal was rejected by a Russian court last month. The 8-time All-Star center with the WNBA's Phoenix Mercury was convicted in August and was sentenced to 9 years in prison. The politically charged case could lead to a high-stakes prisoner exchange between Washington and Moscow. To Greece now, where public and some private sector workers have walked off the job. Now, this is for a 24-hour nationwide strike against price hikes that is disrupting services and transport around the country. Ferries remain tied up in port, severing connections to Greece's islands. This while taxis, buses, and trolleys in the Greek capital are staying off the streets. Trade unions are demanding an increase to the minimum wage, which currently stands at about $700 per month for salaried workers. And they're calling for bolder steps to tackle a 12% inflation rate. Belgium also saw a nationwide strike on Wednesday over the rising cost of living. Australia just can't shake its cyber attack woes. Client data from the country's largest health insurer has been released by an extortionist. It includes details of HIV diagnoses and drug abuse treatments. This comes after Medibank refused to pay a ransom for the personal records of almost 10 million current and former customers. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is a Medibank customer and has had his personal data stolen, but he welcomed the company's refusal to pay the hacker. In the latest news on Twitter, the social networking platform says it will add a gray official label to some high-profile accounts that it currently verifies. Seen as an apparent compromise, the move is part of new owner Elon Musk's overhaul of the platform's verification system. Twitter on Saturday announced that it would offer subscriptions that include the existing blue check for $7.99 a month. Now, that will effectively do away with the verification system that's been in place since 2009. Well, in other tech-related news, Facebook parent Meta is laying off 13% of its workforce. Now, this comes as it contends with falling revenues and a broader tech industry slowdown. The move comes just a week after widespread layoffs at Twitter. Meta, like other social media companies, enjoyed a financial boost during the pandemic lockdown era. This was because more people stayed home and scrolled on their phones and computers. Well, it was just a practice round of Jeopardy, but Canada's quiz show queen reigns supreme. Mateo Roach beat out fellow super champs Amy Schneider and Matt Amodio. This was in a special exhibition game last night and comes before the trio joins the Tournament of Champions semi-final round in a series of games that start tonight. The Halifax native, who now calls Toronto home, became the Jeopardy contestant with the fifth longest winning streak earlier this year. Good luck to Miss Roach. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and follow us on our social media handles. We're available on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily News.